Good evening. Welcome to Bridging the Gap. I am Bishop Vanessa M. Brown. I'm your host and moderator for this evening. And for many of you, you have asked, what is Bridging the Gap about? We are curating conversations. I call them pop-up conversations amongst faith leaders, activists, social justice warriors, and that focus is specifically addressing HIV, sexual health, and human sexuality. And then from a faith-based perspective, we also provide information on combating religious oppression and that religious oppression that seriously, what I consider to impacts the sexual health of Black people, how the Black church can become more invested in HIV prevention and awareness, Black and brown people, right? Human sexuality, bodily autonomy, as well as unpack some of the medical mistrusts and traumas that continue to plague the Black community specifically, but also the Black and brown community. And so I said, I'm going to have these conversations. I've had some really, really great people. I was going to be talking and having these conversations separate from Beyond the Gatekeepers. And the HIV Vaccine Trial Network said, well, why don't you be an ambassador? Okay, tell me about that. So it's really, finding ways to talk about the HIV vaccine, but really about HIV, sexual health, and human sexuality, which is things that I like to talk about, right? And so tonight, I have a very brilliant man who I met some years ago, several years ago in Harlem. And so I'm going to bring on Dr. Edgar Rivera Colon. And I'm going to allow him to introduce himself to our listening audience.
Okay, thank you very much, Bishop Vanessa Brown. Great to be here. I'm a New Yorker, along with being in New Jersey, so it's always good to be with my folks here. I'm Dr. Edgar Rivera Colon. I teach at the University of Southern California's Keck School of Medicine, and I also teach at Columbia. I teach in a certificate of professional achievement in narrative medicine, which is a sort of a new field that's developed over the last 20 years. And by the grace of God, and also Bishop Vanessa's pushing, I'm also ordained in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministry. So, this is actually, it's a year ago this week that I was ordained. And I thank the fellowship. I thank you, Bishop, for being one of our spiritual leaders. And of course, Bishop Flunder and all the other bishops that are constantly pushing us. So right now in Los Angeles, where I live now, I've been doing a lot of work with hotel workers specifically, and also tenants being evicted. And one of the things that we're struggling with is this question of the ongoing COVID pandemic and people whose immune systems are suppressed for a lot of reasons. Sure. And we can get into it, Bishop. We can get into this question of long COVID because I don't know, maybe I'm getting old. But part of it is that I see a lot of young people passing that shouldn't be passing, right? And I'm wondering about that. And we need to investigate that. I'm a medical anthropologist by training. That's why. Yes. But just to stay on topic, if you will, my first training is actually in sex and gender, sexuality and gender studies.
Yes.
And then I became a medical anthropologist because of the HIV crisis. There were so few Black and brown social scientists doing that work. Doing that piece of the work, that I was offered jobs left and right, and being, a poor Puerto Rican, I just took the jobs, right? And a graduate student, so I just took the jobs they came. And that's how I really learned how to be a researcher. And actually, Bishop Vanessa, I met her at one of the gatherings that the leadership of the House Ballroom community had in Brooklyn. And she pastored me, because I was dealing with my mother. Who had Alzheimer's. I was living with my mom, and she said, "You're not doing well," and she pastored me. So I owe you a debt of gratitude on many levels, Bishop. But let's begin the conversation because this is exciting.
Talk about it. Let's unpack all of it, right? You hit every base that needed to be hit. Let's start with HIV. Let's bounce down back to COVID. Let's make that work. So HIV, 30-year-old happening in the world for 30 years. And what happened is, and like somebody told me yesterday, said the numbers didn't just start rising, they've been rising, but the numbers are rising again. 18 to 24, and then I'm told 50 and up. And
That's
so I
right.
want to talk to you about, you're in California.
That's right.
So, I mean, I know you see things, you hear things, you know things. Tell
Hmm.
me, in your guesstimation, as we talk about after 30 years of trying to do this work and doing it, not just trying, but actually doing it, what do your eyes see?
Hmm.
What do you
I
hear? Yeah, what do you hear? What has been your experience in LA as it relates to HIV?
Right, and the majority of my experience is in on the East Coast, but it's interesting to
Okay.
contrast the two, right?
Yes.
Um, part of it is we live in an era of epidemics, right? And I think what's happened is there's a strange sort of cultural piece that happened. Um, the kind of stigma that was attached to being HIV positive and still is attached to it, because people, brown and black folk, that part of our way of dealing things is to keep our business as our business, right? Which
Right.
has a good thing to it and also has things that are not so good about it, right? Like in terms of mental health. So I think what we're seeing right now is that the overwhelming that occurred during the COVID pandemic has sort of put the HIV on the back burner,
I
right?
see.
And I think folks are in a position where they're more aware of their COVID risk, to be honest, at times than they are of the HIV risk, right? So
Yeah.
we need to make a link, right?
Yeah.
We
We
need
do.
to make a link between these two sort of epidemics that we're dealing with. First of all, just to say what you already said, the HIV crisis is not over. The
No,
COVID crisis is not over. No
that's
matter
correct.
what people say, it's
No matter
going
what
on.
people say,
Yeah,
no matter
not
what
enough. Right,
people say,
right. That's an important thing. And that piece of data that you use, 18 to 24, 50 years old, that scares me to a certain extent as a medical anthropologist, because we're talking about very young people who may not know or in sexual networks, right? Where because of the protease inhibitors, because you can take a pill, because of all PrEP, all these things may not feel the same degree of risk or vulnerability.
right?
But there's a problem. COVID's coming on, right?
Yeah.
If my fear for COVID as a medical anthropologist and someone who teaches medical students is that people will not mask sufficiently, not take their vaccines sufficiently, and we will have, and we are having, an epidemic of long COVID, right?
Yes. Oh, we
And long,
absolutely have an epidemic of long COVID. I had someone up,
right,
actually, they're a member of Rivers, and
right,
they talked about long COVID, the effects of it, how they're experiencing it now. They're out of work now. They had to go out,
yeah,
permanently.
yeah,
And then fighting them
hmm,
for workers' comp, not
that's
getting
right.
all their money. So that's like another thing. Like now I have this thing. I'm a long COVID hauler, and now I can't even get my money like I'm supposed to have it.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a brother at NYU, Pato Hilbert, who's a professor there, and who has long COVID, and he's an art professor. Maybe we could have him on the show
Yeah.
because he also is a link because his work really was AIDS Project Los Angeles, and then he went to
Oh,
New York. He got sick with COVID, and this might be someone to talk to because I think what
absolutely.
what we're looking at is, you know, I think, to be honest, Bishop, I think people are overwhelmed,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
think we need, and this is where our faith communities have to come into play. Like,
Yeah.
how do we create conditions under which we can have frank conversations,
Yeah.
right? Like, we understand harm reduction, we
Yes.
understand it, and we understand it, where it came from, how it developed, and it was really people on the street. We
Right.
don't say this enough, who developed harm reduction, right?
Absolutely.
Sex workers, people who needed to protect themselves. And so
Yes.
I think we need to have a spirituality that grounds harm reduction in
Yeah.
a sort of a mutual care piece. And we
Yes.
need some hardcore information for
Yeah.
people for 18 to 24. And I'm puzzled. I'm puzzled, honestly, by people, the rates that are going up with people above 50,
Yeah.
right? Is that despair? That's the question I have, right? That's the question. We've seen it in the white population. There's these two
Yeah.
scientists who wrote a book called Deaths of Despair. And in the
Yeah.
white, sort of working class, lower middle class population, opioids have killed thousands of people. right? And that's
Absolutely.
the other, right? That's the other sort of pandemic. It's opioids and fentanyl. We have long COVID, and we have the HIV that keeps on going. So
Okay.
we're really dealing with what in the old days we used to call syndemics. They're connected, right?
Yes.
They're connected with each other. And
Correct.
we have to reimagine public health. I mean, one of the problems of COVID was, as you know, Bishop Brown, because you're on
Wait,
the
stop
ground.
right there.
Yeah.
Reimagine public health. Did y'all hear that? I,
Mm,
that is so important because, like you said, this whole synergy, all of these things
mhm.
have something in common. And we need to link them together so that we can see what we have to have a bird's eye view of what's really going on. And I think we're missing it because we're chasing one thing over here and chasing one thing over here and chase. So go ahead. I'm
That's
sorry.
exactly right. We have to have a holistic strategy.
Yes.
And one of the confusions, and again, Bishop, you knew this because you were on the ground with your congregation, right? One of the problems at the beginning was all the misinformation around COVID, right? Should people mask it? All that. Now that's been more or less cleared away, right?
Not only
But
was it misinformation, but how about the lack of information?
a
How
lack
about
of information.
how about not telling us that there
Hmm.
was something going on? You know how I found out something was going on? Because the week before Dr. Colon, I was sick. The week before they closed the whole city down, I was sick. I couldn't get out of the
Mm.
bed. I couldn't move. There was no one there to help me. And Bishop
Wow.
Flunder called me
Right.
and she said, I'm thinking about you. Are you okay? I said, I'm so
Wow.
sick, mother. I am
Oh my.
sick. I cannot move. I cannot get out
Mm.
of the bed to go to the bathroom. She said,
Lord have
wait a
mercy.
minute, we need to call somebody. Who could we
Mm.
call right now that could come?
Mm.
We called somebody. She got them on the phone. She said, I need you to go. She told them what to go buy from the store. She said, buy it, whatever it is, I'll pay you back. Just buy it and bring it to her. They
Mm.
did. They went
They
and
did
bought all
right.
this stuff, bought it to me, but guess what? It didn't work. So several more days, I was still sick. And
Mm.
then I was thinking, I was like, I know a doctor. Let me call this person. And I
Mm.
called him and he said, okay. He said, let me just say this. There is something going on. Before any
Mm.
announcement was made, he
Hmm.
said, he worked in emergency medicine. He said, I cannot tell you what this is. We do not know. But I
Mm.
am going to get some prescription drugs. I will bring them to you. But he wouldn't come in my house. He met
Mm.
me at the door and he
Mm.
said, here is your medicine. He talked to me through the hallway from our long hallway door outside my door.
Mm.
Said, there's something going on. And you know
Mm.
what? You're already sick, and I don't want to bring you anything because I don't know what it is. He
Right.
said, but you have everything in this bag and everything in this house you need to
Okay.
be
Amen.
okay. Whatever you do, I was Pastor Brown did. Pastor Brown, do not come to the emergency room. That's
Yes,
he said. What
because in New York, that was the.
he said, whatever you do, do
That's
not
right.
come to the emergency room. And I said,
Mm.
okay. I started taking the
Mm.
medication. I felt better. I had a funeral to do on a
Mm.
Friday. This was like on a
Lord.
Sunday. So a whole week
Mm.
is going by. I had a funeral to do on a Friday. It was one of our beloved members, Minister Lee Truesdale. I was like, there's no way. He's been a part of my life over 25 years,
Right.
part of this ministry from the inception. I've got to find a way to get to him and to do
Mm.
this service.
Mm.
I did. I
Mm.
started feeling better. Friday happened, did the service. Monday, everything was closed down. No more nothing.
I
But
remember.
somebody knew and they didn't give enough information to warn
They
people.
didn't.
Had to
They
be
didn't.
warned by somebody who actually was in the medical field to say, don't even come to the emergency room.
Yeah, because he was seeing the people intubated, and this is. I had one of my students just to share, but that's a classic COVID story, and what you just related to us and to the audience at this point. I had a student of mine. He was doing his psychiatric residency, and in NYU at Langone, and he still struggles with, having an iPad, showing someone who's intubated their family, and saying goodbye, right? And what I think what happened is, first of all, sort of I call it imperial arrogance that things will not affect us in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's a global village. It's a global village,
Imperial
right?
arrogance.
Yes, imperial arrogance. And we could see what's happening in China. We could see, I mean, with air travel, you tomorrow can be in Berlin. Right?
Absolutely.
I could be Buenos Aires, right? So the
Yes.
idea that we can insulate ourselves from these
Yes.
things is absurd. But you
Absolutely.
can have a rigorous public health. And what happened was a lot of the leaders abandoned the ideals of public health, that it's
Absolutely.
shared, that there are basic things that you do, and it was that abandonment that led the middle management people who are struggling to
Yep.
also get overwhelmed,
And we
right?
got to call it out.
Yeah, I mean, it was an abandonment,
It
right?
was a
And this
predicament.
is something that our brown and black people understand, because I grew up in the ghetto.
Me
Many of
too.
us grew up in the ghetto, right?
Absolutely.
And we know where the resources are and where the
Absolutely.
resources are not,
That
right?
is
And
correct.
and so I think what we have to think about is, when we look at COVID and the ongoing COVID and long COVID, is what does it mean to live in a society where the people who are in charge of public health are okay with populations becoming disabled
Yeah.
unnecessarily?
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and we're going to need to go back to masking. We're in the summer surge right now. So for all our people, please mask appropriately, be prudent. You're in a big crowd, mask, right?
Mask.
Maybe you're taking an Uber, maybe it's a 20-minute ride, mask for
Mask.
yourself and for the driver, right?
Sure.
And also keep up with your vaccines. And in terms of COVID, people who are 65 and above can get a vaccine right now, and
Right.
then get another one in October. Best time to get it right now will be in October, as the winter surge occurs, because it takes about a couple of weeks for it to be really become effective. But
Right.
this is not enough, right? This is not enough. I say it again, we have to think about public health as part of our commons, part of the shared thing that we all have,
Like it.
and it's not impossible. I was in the Netherlands last year, or I don't know, remember this, March or something, and it was clear to me that it was profoundly a less violent society, because there were more shared resources. Everyone has health. There's a less sort of like antagonism. And now we know, and as you know, I'm a social scientist. So
Yes.
looking at the political landscape of the United States, right, we are in a very dangerous position right now.
We are.
And all of that has health effects,
Yes.
right? If we don't have people advocating in government and outside of government for disability for people who have long COVID, or disability for people who, have HIV or AIDS, we're in
Yeah.
we're in
We're
trouble, and
trying.
it affects our community first. I
Yes.
mean, in here in California, in the San Joaquin Valley, where you have all these Latin American immigrants working in the agricultural field, your blueberries, your strawberries, and so on,
Absolutely.
died in tons. Bishop, died in tons. Queens, New York, was an epicenter. I mean,
Absolutely.
people literally died in their houses and were not counted in the figures.
We're not
So
counting.
yeah, and Bishop, the other piece I was going to say is, we need a testing regime again. We
Yes.
need free testing, accessible testing for people, and we need to push the vaccines.
And
We've
it's like
done this.
it's like everything went away. So why did
Yeah.
everything go away? Because we
Why did everything
know
go out?
that there's several mutations that are constantly happening. I think the last
Yep.
thing somebody told me was flirt. Might be something
Look,
different now,
that's
right?
what's
You know,
happening. Yeah.
constant mutations are happening, but we're
Yeah.
still not properly doing the things that we need to do, because like I heard somebody say, well, it's just like a cold.
Oh
Really?
no.
Is
No,
that what you have
no,
to say?
no.
It's not just like a cold.
No,
Somebody
no,
that
it's not.
has that's immune compromised, it's not just a cold.
No,
And
it's not,
so
Bishop. That's right.
we gotta care better than what I believe we've been caring. Um,
Right,
yeah.
right, and
So
yeah, no, and we're going to have to do both public health from below,
yeah,
right, in our communities, and governance from below. What does
yeah,
that mean? Well, we've done this before. I mean, this is nothing new
right,
to us.
right,
This is like, we need to pool our resources, and we need to give out the accurate information so
yeah,
people know that. So we
Yep.
can. This is called community care and self-defense,
Community
right?
care
And self-defense,
and
right?
self-defense.
That's in the Black freedom struggle. These are tools that have been developed over centuries
Yes.
throughout the Americas, and our people know how to do this. Our folks
Yes.
know how to do this,
We
right?
do.
Now the people going to run this show, and I can't tell you as a social scientist who's going to win the election. I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't know, right? But
Right.
what I do know is this: that whoever wins, we have to be in a position of what I would call strategic protagonism,
Yeah.
proactive, strategic protagonism. We cannot sit back and say, oh, well, we have to engage our communities and create the kind of what I call safe and sacred spaces of restoration, renewal, and retreat.
Love it.
We have that tradition. That is nothing
Yeah.
new for us.
No,
And so go ahead.
I was going to say, so I want to go and I got to get on this train. I know you're going to get on it with me. Let's circle back. We have we have HIV,
Right.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
But we have COVID.
That's right.
And guess what? We have the Black church.
We do.
30 years ago, the Black church did nothing.
That's right. That's right. And I have to say, the Latinx church didn't do much either.
Okay.
Let's be clear, right?
So when we talk about, let's just get down to brass tacks. The Black church, from your mouth, the Latinx church did nothing about HIV.
That's right.
30 years later, I won't say we didn't do anything, but we're still not doing enough. There's still too much religious oppression.
That's right.
Around all of this. There's still so much. You used the word earlier. You talked about, leadership abandoning public health. There's still too much of that, because even when COVID-19 happened, for much of the Black church, people were still having service, and I didn't understand.
Yeah, I pastors were. I was talking to our brother, Reverend Dr. Eric Thomas from the Presbyterian Church in Brooklyn.
Yes,
and he had his congregation's above 50, most of them.
Absolutely.
And he said to me, we cannot meet.
Right.
I love you all, but we cannot meet. That would be malpractice.
Absolutely.
As a pastor. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. That's right. That's right. The Black church and our churches, the Black Brown church, we need to be held accountable.
We need to be held accountable.
We need to be held accountable. And the other piece, I think, is, and this is not to scare your audience, okay?
No,
if you follow the work of someone like Dr. Rob Wallace, who I would suggest you have on again.
Yeah. Well, remember, I had him on Gatekeepers.
That's right. That's how I got ordained. Anyway, so there's HIV, there's H5N1, which is avian flu. And what we're seeing consistently, I've been following the International Society for Infectious Diseases. They have a website. You can get, all kinds of information on infectious diseases. And we're seeing it. Right now, there's an outbreak in Iowa and Colorado amongst cattle. So we've seen it move from birds to cattle. And there has been some humans who are affected by it. It has a larger mortality rate than COVID. So we have to be very careful, and we have to start thinking, remember in the 70s and 80s, there was a part of the Black freedom movement was free the land, right? Free the land, right? And we got to get back to thinking about what has large agro-industrial farming done to our ecosystems, right? Sure. Such that we are introducing new viruses to populations to which we don't have vaccines. And that first, I don't know how many months of COVID, we had nothing. We had nothing. And it was like a race to get the vaccine. And then we had to fight against people saying the vaccine was going to kill. I mean, we had to do a lot of information.
Well, that has to do with that misinformation.
Exactly. Right? And that's not politically uninterested. That's politically interested.
We can go back to Tuskegee. You can talk
Yeah,
about all of the information that went on with that, and then how that affected at least the Black community. And
that's
so
right.
now we've got a vaccine, HIV vaccine, we got medication, we got the
Praise
COVID-19
God.
vaccine, we got medication, but people don't want to take it.
Yeah, no, we
Don't
have
want
to,
to
we
take it
really
because
have,
you know why? Because I don't know what's in that vaccine. I don't know what's in that, and that was like this conversation. I was talking about it with Bishop-elect Kevin Taylor,
mm,
all of this conversation about, well, we don't know what's in it. And he said, somebody said it to him. He said, well, do you know what's in that Dorito you're about to eat? Right? Like seriously,
you
like we
buy
got
Happy Meals for your kid?
to now, right? So we gotta
Right.
really like talk
Yeah.
about it in our
Hmm.
community, because if we don't talk about what we need to do, and I guess I want to
Yeah.
just harken back to what in your opinion do you believe the Black church needs to do? The
Black
Latinx
church needs
church, what do we need to do?
art.
Because
Right.
HIV is still here,
Right.
and COVID is still here, and then we've
Yeah.
got, like you just said, other things that are happening, right? And
Right.
so we have to
Right.
have our eyes open, our ears open, but our hearts open and our minds open. What do you feel like we need to do?
I think honestly, we need to have at least one day where we focus on HIV accurate information for our communities, right? Including the possibility of HIV vaccine, right?
Okay,
Which I think a lot of people have a lot of mysterious. It's not mysterious. It's a process of figuring things out
sure.
on, a genetic level, right? The other piece is we need to introduce COVID again into our conversations at the faith community level, especially young folks who sometimes may not think they'll get long COVID. You can get long COVID. And we
Yeah,
need to put long COVID front and center. Also, if you have a compromised immune system, getting long COVID could kill you,
yeah,
right? Or could disable you, right? And
absolutely.
and the other piece I think now is to keep our eyes open and battle anti-science information, and also understand. I mean, I teach a course of racism in medicine, and understand that people's fears are not ungrounded.
That's correct.
There's a history of
It's a
abuse,
history.
right? There's
Absolutely.
a history of abuse amongst Black and brown people.
Yep.
Here in LA, it's been sterilization in the
Yes.
70s of Mexican women. Depends
See,
on where you are in the country. So I think
absolutely.
we need to have that, and we need to have all our stakeholders come and provide resources for people, provide vaccines for people, provide testing for people. No one should pay for a COVID test.
Yeah.
No one should pay for an HIV test, really, when we think about it. So
Absolutely.
it's that piece where our faith communities help us reimagine public health. We need to put that public back into health, and that part of that public are faith communities as well, because we have conversations in faith communities that we don't have anywhere else.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. I guess the thing is about sexual health.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that we're not having these conversations about sexual health in our
No,
churches,
we're not. We're not
right?
having, and it's yeah, no, we're not having questions like in terms of HPV and our
Yes.
young people making sure that they before they're sexually active getting that vaccine, right? Or testicular cancer, getting those kind of sort of examines and figuring out what people need to do. All the various parts of it of sexuality and being frank and bold in our
Yeah.
conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because when we're frank as faith leaders, people give themselves permission to be frank, right? And we know that whatever is hidden is your weakness,
Yeah.
right? And as faith communities, we need to just talk about this question of sexual health, holistic sexual health, from adolescence through, right? Because if people are being infected at 60 of
Yeah.
HIV, that means they're having sex.
Yeah.
Right? And I
And
think
we
a
got
myth
both
is
sides.
that people, once they get to no, they don't have sex. And no, they do have sex,
They
right?
do have
And
sex.
they have sexual health issues, and we need to
Yes.
also, have not to romanticize our elders as if they're not sexual beings,
Right. Right.
right? Or that's our church mother or church father or deacon. That person doesn't know they could be at risk as well. To have those kind of conversations, right?
I think it's important that we have those conversations. I also want to go, and I feel like I'm going in a little circle, but it's okay. I want to talk about your work with the house and ballroom community
Sure,
and the
sure,
things
sure.
that
Yeah,
I think that's very important to this conversation.
sure. So the bulk, as everyone knows, the House Ballroom community is a Black and Latinx community. It's an alternative kinship system and dance performance circuit that
Yep.
we think began in the late '60s. We think from the balls in Harlem, and it's my work really was um, figuring out how people who are leaders in the house ballroom community move between the HIV/AIDS prevention world and the ballroom scene, the ballroom
Yes.
community. Because the ballroom community is an autonomous, it's like in that sense, like the Black church. It's
Absolutely.
autonomous, right?
Absolutely.
And it
It's
and
its
so
own church by itself.
it's its own church. Right, right. I actually wrote a piece about that. And so I think that what we see in the ballroom is what I would call either code switching or moving between institutions and
Sure.
forms of life, right?
Yes.
And I think what I learned most was that leaders in the ballroom, like Arbet Santana, was one of the people I write about in my dissertation, were able to both work at GMHC and be leaders in that community and bring resources from the
Yes.
HIV prevention world into the community. And
Yes.
to me, that's the best kind of intervention
Yes.
that the resources that exist, right, whether it's HIV vaccine trials network, all that, right, is should be, handed over to the community by community leaders,
Agreed.
people who understand it. And the ballroom is a really interesting place because it challenges stereotypes around gender, around masculinity and femininity, and
Which
it's
is
also like a mentoring place. And it
yes.
could be harsh, right? Because your parents can be a little harsh, right? There's a harsh discipline too, but it's also a place where people can make mistakes amongst people who care for them, right?
Yes.
And it's the world may not care for you,
Yeah.
but you can make the mistakes here,
Yeah.
and the costs are low, right? Whereas
Yes.
in the world, who knows, right? And
Yes.
what I've been very proud to see in the ballroom communities, first, how global it's become,
Yes.
right?
Very much so.
And
Very much so.
Michael Roberson
Yes.
predicted that a long time ago.
Absolutely.
And now you have non-binary categories,
Absolutely.
which I had never expected that to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's the brilliance of the ball scene. The ballroom has an ability to read the culture and create its own version of it, and also influence the wider culture, like like the Pose, the whole Hollywood piece,
Which
right?
Michael was a played a consultant's role for
That's
several
right.
years. Absolutely.
That's right. Right. And those stories went into the popular culture, the language, the kind of language we heard always at balls throughout the
Right.
90s is now common parlance, right?
Right.
Like, what's the
Indeed.
tea?
Right.
So as an anthropologist, I was really interested in uh, grassroots leadership and how it
Yes.
navigates between institutions. And this is something that I learned it from a lot of places. But one of my bosses, famous Black lesbian poet when I was a graduate student at Rutgers, Cheryl Clark.
Yes.
Cheryl said, I was working with her with a social justice leadership thing. And I got into a fight about something. And she said, okay, Edgar, stop. She just said, that Puerto Rican boy thing ain't going to work right now. And she said to me something which is like a piece of wisdom that I will always have in my head, I hope. She said, we're here in these institutions to create space for our folks who have a right to those resources.
Yes.
Right. And I think she, in that moment, crystallized for me what I was investigating in the ballroom.
Sure. Sure.
I was investigating how people engage and struggle within institutions that we didn't create, but we have a right, our people have a right to those resources.
Yeah.
And it's that space. And I'll be honest, it's really been Black, Brown, Latinx, Latina women and gender oppressed people who do the best work when it comes to that.
Beautiful.
Right. Because us boys, we want to fight or flight, right? Right.
Fight
so
or flight.
to fight or flight. Whereas the idea is to use the weight of the institution against itself to create community. right?
Yeah,
So yeah, I really appreciate my time in the ballroom, and it's astounding what's happened to the ballroom, and a lot of leadership came out of the ballroom, and a lot of leadership came out of HIV/AIDS not-for-profit
absolutely.
organization.
Yes,
For a lot of people, that was their political and civic training. They moved on to
absolutely.
other things, perhaps, but we wouldn't
Yes,
have the kind of leadership we have today if it wasn't for that.
I agree. Listen, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I want you to leave us some last words, if you can, around
Mm-hmm.
HIV, around COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been such an encouragement in my life. Your
Well, thank you,
social
Bishop.
justice work and your political work, your political
Mm-hmm.
activism, how you are out there with labor unions and, and others, putting your own life on the line as well. Your academic work, your research has been a boon for our community as
Thank you,
Black and
Bishop.
Brown people, and
Mm.
you are greatly appreciated amongst us. So you need to know that
Thank
we have
you.
conversations about you all the time.
Thank you, Bishop. I'm humbled. The thing I would say is this: there's two things to think about. There's a beautiful book by a New Mexican Latina anthropologist around the question of the opioid um, uh, crisis, and she says that the way our community deals with things is using watchfulness.
Watch.
Watchfulness, right? Remember watch nights in the church, right?
I have
So,
them.
of course.
That's,
So we have an ethic of care, of watchfulness, not surveillance,
no, it's a difference.
watchfulness. It's
Absolutely.
difference, right? So we want to be watchful with HIV, with COVID, with all the things that are happening, and we want to be informed, right?
Yes.
And we want to go back also to this notion of creating with our partners, like the HIV Vaccine Trials Network, what Toni Morrison talks about in Beloved, the clearing, right?
Yes.
That beautiful scene in that novel where Baby Suggs Holy calls the community together and they experience all their emotions and their feelings. It's a clearing. So we need two things: watchfulness, right? Facts, information,
Yes.
practices, right? Anti-stigma interventions, right? And
Yes.
we need the clearing. We need the spaces where we can have community. So those are
Yes.
the two words I would say we could leave today: is be watchful,
Yes.
create the clearings for our
Yes.
folks in these difficult times.
I
Um,
love that. I love that. And I love you. Thank you so
Love
much
you
for
too,
your
Bishop. Thank
time.
you.
And thank you all for watching Bridging the Gap on tonight. We are excited about Dr. Edgar, and we know that
Thank
you'll
you.
share on Facebook and YouTube. We are appreciating you very, very much. Thank you to
Thank you,
the
Bishop.
HIV Vaccine Trials Network, to Rivers of Living Water United Church of Christ. Have a wonderful evening, and God bless you.